Hey everybody, it's Greg again. It's another edition of Unbreakable podcast. It's Thursday, September 12th, and we're doing our classic TV show of the week. And we'll probably chop this up into 20-minute segments because it's a good one. You're not going to want to miss it. It's The Honeymooners, one of my favorite shows of all time. You know, I'm a big Jackie Gleason fan, and I can't wait to share all this uh, facts and trivia and everything about the honeymooners. You got to know the show. It's about a Brooklyn bus driver who has a wife, and they have an apartment, and the money is tight, and they have the neighbors, the Nortons and Norton, and it's all about their life together. And Ralph is always trying to get rich quick and money schemes and all these colorful characters that come into their life. It's such an iconic show. It only lasted one season. Can you believe that? How a show can have an influence on people. Only one season, and yet it is one of the greatest TV shows of all time. Let's talk about the Honeymooners. 39 episodes. That was what they call the classic 39. And we're not going to talk about reunions. We're not going to talk about the lost episodes. We're talking about the original 39. The Honeymooners started on October the 1st, 1955, and it just ran until September 22nd, 1956. It came on at 8:30 on CBS. And originally, Honeymooners started as a sketch every so often on a show called The Cavalcade of Stars, and Gleason was on that show. And that show evolved into the Jackie Gleason show. And, you know, Gleason was a big star back then, along with everybody had a variety show. Jack Benny, Red Skelton, Perry Como, and it was what it was. You had singers on there, you had actors, you had jugglers. You never know what you're going to have. That's why they called it variety. Gleason was a big star. Not only a comic who could do everything. He was a serious actor. He did The Hustler with Paul Newman, the movie about Paul. Great movie. He did Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds. Also a fun movie. He was a pretty serious actor. He was great. He did these music stuff where he did all these arrangements, Music for Lovers by Jackie Gleason. Ooh. And he once said, they asked him, why did you do these records? And he said, oh, I'm just trying to help the boys back in Brooklyn get lucky. Gleason could not read music, by the way. He could not read music, but he had all these albums. He was a genius. So when the Honeymooners first started, they were the #2 show in the country behind I Love Lucy. Eventually, by the time the Honeymooners ended in 56, it was still solid in ratings, #19, but it was slipping. And we're going to talk about why the Honeymooners only lasted for one season. The opening theme, that iconic theme, where you have the fireworks going off and everything, was called You're My Greatest Love. And it was actually co-written by Gleason himself. Buick was the main sponsor of the show, and it was very common back then, where Gleason himself would do commercials for Buick, either before or during the show. We don't see those now in the syndication versions. And really, Gleason's main competitor, you might say, back then was the Perry Como show, which was huge. Perry Como was big in the 50s in America. And Gleason went opposite him. And for a while, the Honeymooners held their own. But then Como started taking over. And that's when things started to change. But you know, Gleason played Ralph Cramden, this portly bus driver, Brooklyn bus driver. He worked for the Gotham Bus Company. Some things about Ralph. He loved to bowl and play pool. Always had these get rich schemes. He was a member of the Raccoon Lodge. He was a member of the Bus Drivers Union. And, the character of Ralph Cramden inspired Fred Flintstone because the Flintstones was sort of a ripoff of the Honeymooners, only in cartoon form. In fact, back in the day, it was so similar to the Honeymooners, the premise, the plot. Gleason actually thought about suing. But then he thought, nah, do I really want to be the guy who forces the Flintstones off the air? I mean, the Flintstones were very popular in the early 60s. It's one of the top rated shows. Think about all these little kids who used to love the Flintstones. Adults love the Flintstones. They still do. And Gleason didn't want to be remembered for that, so he decided not to sue. But they didn't hide the fact that the Flintstones were sort of a ripoff from the Honeymooners. To show you what an influence the character of Ralph Cramden had on New York City, Brooklyn has a bus depot, even to this day, named after Ralph Cramden. And 1999, an 8-foot bronze statue of Ralph Cramden in his uniform was erected in Manhattan, the Midtown Port Authority bus terminal. When you go up there and you look, you'll see a statue of Ralph Cramden. Ralph was voted by TV Guide as the number 13 greatest characters, TV characters of all time, number 13. And of course, his long-suffering and patient wife, Alice. Alice was played by Audrey Meadows in these 39 episodes. It was played by another actress named Ron, but again, we're not going to get into it. But Audrey Meadows, actually, when Gleason moved to Miami, the Honeymooners were filmed in New York. In the early 60s, Gleason decided to take his productions, everything down to Miami Beach. And that's when you saw the Gleason show in Miami, coming from beautiful Miami Beach. And you'd see the camera go through the water all the way up to the beach there, and the palm trees and all. But he did that, and he decided to revive the Honeymooners again. And these are what we call the lost episodes. He asked Audrey Meadows to continue her role as Alice Crump. But Audrey did not want to relocate to Miami. She liked where she was living, and she understood that in order to continue with the role of Alice Cramden, she would have to relocate. She wouldn't be able to go back and forth. That wasn't feasible to do. Alice's maiden name in the show was Gibson. That was her maiden name. And at the time when they had the Honeymooners, the 39 episodes, Ralph and Alice had been married 14 years. No children, 14 years, not even a pet. And Alice, before she met Ralph, was training to be a secretary. In fact, you'll see one of the episodes where she goes back to work. Ralph is on strike. And they don't know how long the strike's going to last. Somebody has to make money to put food on the table. Alice decides to go back to work part-time as a secretary because she had all these skills. And so the episode turns out where Ralph is jealous of her boss, and he forces Alice to quit. Luckily, Ralph, the strike ends, and he goes back to his work as a bus driver. So we meet during the series. We meet And Alice has a sister named Agnes who gets married during the series. And of course, her mother. Her mother. Um, one of the best parts of the Honeymooners is when Ralph has battles with the Blabbermouth, who is his mother-in-law, House's mother. Who we don't know this, but before we meet the Cramdens, they had been living with Alice's mother for 6 years. So that's how this all built up. We never meet, but we briefly meet Ralph's mom in an episode, very briefly at the end of an episode. We never meet his father during the show. And then we have Ed Norton. Ed Norton, of course, was played by the great Art Carney. Ed Norton has to be my favorite, even to this day. We're talking about 70 years later. Unbelievable. Ed Norton has to be my favorite TV character. It was just like this buddy we would have, this guy who would go to the ball game and have a beer with, or play pool with ball game. He was a little goofy, but he had great sense of humor. He was kind to people. I loved Art Carney and loved Ed Norton. We know that Ed Norton worked in the sewer. And basically, he was a sewer worker, but he described his job as I'm a sub supervisor in the subdivision of the depth of subterranean sanitation. In other words, I just keep things moving along. And you could hear Norton say those words, you know. Norton loved, of course, he loved bowling and pool like Ralph, but he was very good at ping pong, which Ralph wasn't. What else? Ralph or Ed Norton was in the Navy in World War II. Now this was interesting. Did you ever notice, if you're a Honeymooners fan, that the Nortons had a very much nicer apartment, nicer furniture than the Cramdens? And because Norton made about the same as Ralph did. Norton made $62 a week, which it's equivalent to nowadays would be $700 a week. Not much, but it was something. And we find out from the series, if you are an aficionado of the Honeymooners like I am, that how did the Nortons end up with a much nicer apartment than the Cramdens, even though Ed and Ralph are making about the same amount of money? It's because Ed took out a lot of credit in his days, a lot of credit, as we find out later on. Ed again, spin off Barney Rubble and Yogi Bear. Harry Yogi Bear, hey, boo boo, hey. If you notice Yogi Bear, he's wearing the tie, the vest, the hat. That's Ed Norton. That is Ed Norton. TV Guide proclaimed Ed Norton as the #2 greatest character ever in television history. And Entertainment Weekly said that Ed Norton was the 8th greatest sidekick of all time. And his wife Trixie, who we would see maybe once or twice during the episode, but she was sort of in the background. Trixie was. Trixie's real name was Thelma. Played by Joyce Randolph, who was the last cast member to die. She only died about maybe a year ago or so. Lived to be like 99 years old. Joyce Randolph. And her spinoff was Betty Rubble of the Flintstones. In the pilot episode of the Honeymooners, the role of Trixie was written much differently that character was an abusive, expert burlesque dancer. Sort of this sexy lady. Gleason did like that. He asked the writers to rewrite that role, and they did, and they made Trixie into more of a regular housewife. And then you had other characters too as time went on. Mrs. Barricati, who lived in the apartment building. That bird bomb, who was a friend, that bird bomb, a friend of Ed Norton. That bird bomb was the real name of George Burns. That was his real name, Nathaniel Birnbaum. Norton, Art Carney, told Gleason, let's name the character that Birnbaum after George Burns, and he did. A couple final things, and then we are going to go to part 2, because I have a little bit more of the honeymooners that we want to celebrate. The landlord in the apartment was Mr. Johnson. The apartment actually does exist, 328 Chauncey Street in Brooklyn. Not in the exact location as the honeymooners, but there is a real 328 Chauncey Street in Brooklyn. You had some of the other apartment, most of the locations were in the apartment building, either Ralph's apartment, Ed's apartment. Sometimes you'd have to have a seat in the pool hall. But that was about it. Sometimes out in the park with the park bench. Some of the other characters, he would mostly be because they would be in the apartment. Tommy Garrity was this little kid who played stickball and had the measles one time, and the whole apartment building had to be quarantined. Mrs. Bennett was a person who lived there when the episode where Ralph was a janitor and she wanted her radiator fixed. Carlos Sanchez was the mambo dancer who all the women in the apartment building were swooping over, and Ralph and Ed decided to learn how to mambo because this Carlos, who was this Latin lover type like a Ricky Ricardo type, was swooping along the woman. And of course, Gleason had his catchphrases over the years, like at the end of every honeymooners episode, no matter what happened, no matter how much he screwed him, Alice would forgive him. He would always end it with saying, "Baby, you're the greatest." And he would kiss Joyce Randolph, tip her over, give a big smooch there. And that's how usually most of the episodes. Of course, when he was, we never still hit Alice, and hopefully he did it. He was always threatening her with "Pal Zoom to the moon." Now that was my center to the moon. Bang, zoom. A lot of these catchphrases were used in our real world. Like, "Baby, you're the greatest." "Pal Zoom." "Bang, zoom." How sweet it is. Like, the basic would drink a cup of coffee and say, "That's good coffee." How sweet it is. And of course, the habada. When Ralph was really stuck, the habada, he didn't know what to say. Habada. And of course, the one catchphrase that he always used, whether it be in the honeymooners or Saturday Night Musicals. And away we go. And on Gleason's tombstone, Gleason's buried in Florida. On Gleason's tombstone, it says, "And away we go." And away we go is true. That is the end of part 1 of Honeymooners celebration. I'll be back with part 2 as soon as I post this. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn a little bit more about the Honeymooners, stick with me. I have about another 20 minutes worth of information I want to give you about the honeymooners and why the honeymooners only lasted one season. Why? Why didn't they go on? You'll be surprised. And I'll be right back. Thanks for watching. Take care.